So the latest report of the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change has painted a dire picture of Earth and mankind's future. Global warming is here, and it will soon be impossible to keep it below 2 degrees unless greenhouse gas emissions are quickly and drastically reduced. Now, one of the world's largest CO2 emitters is Australia and its vast coal industry.
Our planet is in distress.
This was the scene outside Australia's Parliament following Monday's report about the devastating impact of the climate crisis. Protesters are furious at Prime Minister Scott Morrison's response. They accuse him of using deflection tactics instead of taking responsibility.
We cannot ignore the fact that the developing world accounts for 2/3 of global emissions, and those emissions are rising. That is a stark fact. It is also a clear fact that China's emissions account for more than the OECD combined.
While China is by far the world's largest coal producer, Australia comes in 4th place, putting it in the company of countries with far larger economies and populations, ahead even of the United States. The reliance on coal has made Australia one of the world's highest per capita carbon emitters. The relationship between the government and the industry is considered cosy and is thought to account for the Prime Minister's refusal to join other countries in committing to a net zero emissions target by 2050.
Now, of course, it's not as if policymakers haven't done anything to stop global warming. In many regions, including here in Germany, there's a push towards green energy. To entice utilities and industrial plants to switch from fossil to renewables, they have to buy so-called emission certificates for each tonne of CO2 they emit, making the use of electricity more expensive. Now, in Europe, the United Kingdom has the most expensive commercial electricity at 14 cents a kilowatt an hour. Germany is just behind at 12 cents. Norway's industrial energy costs are the lowest in Europe at just under 3.5 Eurocent. But the US is even lower at 1.5 Eurocents. And Chinese companies don't even pay 1 Eurocent a kilowatt hour for their power. And that, of course, seems to put German companies at quite some disadvantage. Especially small and medium-sized enterprises say the high cost of energy threatens their ability to compete internationally.
The family-owned Worley company near Hamburg manufactures chemical components for paint production. It runs electric pumps to cool its production equipment. They use more energy in one day than an average 4-person household uses in a whole year. The electricity price wasn't a major factor here once, but for the last few years, energy prices have been climbing steadily. Taxes and other levies already make up almost half of the electricity price. Worley's owner would rather spend the money elsewhere. Every year, my electricity bill goes up by 10 to 15%. I could use that to create jobs, I could invest in research and development. I don't have the money to invest in climate-neutral production machinery. The burden is too high to match the challenges of the future adequately. The medium-sized company chief says the levy he pays for national renewable energy expansion is far too high. He wants it abolished immediately. Besides the renewable power levy, the CO2 emissions charge is also weighing on balance sheets. It's levied for fossil fuel use. It affects high energy consumption companies like this brickworks. Managing Director Klaus Grevelmeier already pays €800,000 a year for his CO2 emissions, rising sharply to €2 million a year in 2 years' time. He'd be only too happy to convert his kilns from natural gas to green technology. Nowadays, it's technically possible to use hydrogen in a 17% mix with natural gas. You can't replace natural gas with it totally yet, for technical and financial reasons. Klaus Grevelmeier's energy costs are spiralling, and he fears the high environmental levies will undermine his company's international competitiveness. Germany's energy transition needs a boost. Despite eco-levies and CO2 charges, renewable energy expansion is faltering. Right now, almost as many old wind turbines are being dismantled as new ones are coming online. Companies are supposed to go more electric, but the electricity for that is not there. Where are the megawatts of eco-power that we need going to come from? Then they say hydrogen's the solution, but where's the hydrogen? Where are the volumes? Who gets it? No one knows. What is known is that production costs in Germany are rising steadily, because energy costs are moving in one direction only nowadays, upwards.
Now, earlier I talked to Barbara Breitschop from the Fraunhofer Institute for Systems and Innovation Research with a focus on energy policy and energy markets. And I asked her how companies can be expected to compete internationally when the competition only pay a fraction on energy.
Well, it is difficult for small or also medium-sized companies to face that international competition. There is not the only alternative they have is try to buy green electricity at a lower cost than we have now. They are now paying for the normal electricity they get from a supplier from the grid. Or to start self-production of renewables. This is another alternative they do have.
All right, so one way for companies to switch to green energy and save costs could be to produce green energy themselves. I'd like to ask Konrad Busen at the Frankfurt Stock Exchange what the business world makes of that. Is this very far-fetched, or is it actually an interesting notion?
Well, Monica, this seems the way to go for companies if they want to avoid too high energy costs. Of course, it is going to be another burden on the to-do lists of companies, but one that will be difficult to avoid. Everyone here in Germany, businesses as well as consumers, are aware that carbon dioxide emissions will have to go down in the future. And producing your own energy, for example, by installing solar panels on the roof of a building, might be a clever way to go.
OK, Konrad Busen there from the Frankfurt Stock Exchange. Business is not totally against producing green energy themselves. Thank you very much.